Good evening, my listening friends, and welcome back once again to the DeFi Collective with your host, Robert Vaughn, and your other host, Alex Jewell. Today, if this is your first time, I'll just reiterate that we cover everything that has to do with decentralized finance. We cover blockchain, we talk about liquidity pools, we talk about decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, anything that has to do with decentralized finance, we talk about it on the show. And one of the things that we think is very important, and it's probably going to become even more important, is democratization through DeFi. We live in a democracy. Some people say we're hanging by a few threads. I don't know if I agree with that, but democracy is always a work in progress. And because of the economic system that we have, prevailing economic system, which is capitalism, things are based on, how much money you make. People are held in high esteem if they make a lot of money. It doesn't matter if they're, the head of a cartel or the head of Cartier. If you got $10 billion, people tend to hold you in high esteem. And we think that there should be another criteria for people to be held in high esteem, other than just how much money you make, because the fact that you make more money doesn't necessarily make you right. Now, because of the system that we have, that's sort of how it works. Those who have the money call the shots, and there are a lot of, China's capitalist, the United States is capitalist, a lot of other countries are capitalist, even though they have very different political systems. Mm-hmm. We're more democratic than China, but we still have the same economic system, capitalism. Now, one of the things that decentralized finance does is it sort of reverses the flow of ownership. So it puts the power back to the people, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And it does this through decentralization, particularly of finances. For instance, with Bitcoin, one person owns Bitcoin. It's governed by a protocol. Excuse me. It's governed by a protocol that there's a ledger that everybody can take a look at. And Alex, give us a brief description of democracy, just so we're on the same page.
Yeah, democracy goes all the way back to Athens. The idea that government is for the people, by the people, right? That through participation in government, through the systems of government, people can create their own governance through the system. And democracy is that reflection, that representation of the people in government, as opposed to strictly some sort of authoritarian, subjective ruling by a ruling family or individuals. And so that's really at the heart of democracy, right? Is like, how do you create a system where people can rule themselves effectively? Bob, I think your sound went out.
Okay, how is it
back? Oh, there we go. Yep.
Okay. For instance, a king would be the antithesis of democracy, where all power and decision making is centralized in one person.
Yeah.
And I think most people would agree that it's probably better to live in a society or system where you have some input. For instance, I may have a different belief than Alex, but we can always maybe vote. A group of us could maybe vote and see what the prevailing, thought is, and then we could compromise. Mm-hmm. Conflict resolution through reciprocity is the basis of our legislature. It doesn't always work that way, but that's how it's supposed to work. So democratization through DeFi can take several different forms. One, we talked about before, is blockchain voting, or democratization of voting. One of the problems we have now is that, people are less, they have less faith in the voting system than they did before, and for good reason. Because people have tampered with the vote ever since there was a vote. There was always someone trying to scam the vote and make sure certain votes didn't count, certain votes counted more. And so that's always been a problem. Now, one of the ways decentralized finance can remedy that is through blockchain voting. The thing about a blockchain is that there's a record of everything that transpires on the blockchain. So, for instance, if we had blockchain voting, and maybe your social security number could be double as your voting number, because everybody has one, theoretically, or there could be another way of verifying that, Alex is really Alex. And, when you vote, there would be a record of you having voted. So if anybody has any question about whether or not the vote is legitimate, they could go to the blockchain and see if the vote and recount the vote. And it would be there for everybody to see. We have, we have confidence in our voting system, but we have checks and balances. We have people that watch the other people, that watch the people, that count the votes.
Yeah, it's a very slow, arduous process.
Yeah, it's very slow, yeah. Whereas on the blockchain, when you vote, there would be a record of your vote, and it could be, we wouldn't have to wait 3 weeks to see who the president is or who the senator is. It would be instantaneous.
Right.
This one got more votes, so he's elected. And there would be no need for a recount. Yeah. Because everything would be verifiable, and you could have people whose sole job it was to verify that, Alex voted, I voted, so-and-so voted, and that could be done through some sort of protocol. So it would be a much quicker system. But that's just one example of how decentralized finance can help democratize our society and make it more equitable. I think that's at the bottom of everything. We want to make it more equitable to everybody.
Right.
Alex, what are some other ways you think DeFi, maybe DAOs or worker co-ops, some other ways that decentralized finance can help make society more equitable?
Obviously voting is a great example. But there's also this idea of representation and all sorts of decisions we need to make, right? Or communities we participate in.
Right.
How you participate at work is always sort of, it's almost like a not a super democratic process either, right? You sort of there's like clubs and groups and employee surveys, but at the end of the day, how you participate at work is really up to the ruling class of work, right? It's really up to the C-levels, how things are run. Yeah. And so you think about all of the issues that presents of, what workers feeling fulfilled or feeling accounted for, or, feeling taken care of by the company or cared for by the company, when the company exists solely to centralize wealth and power to itself and on the backs of the workers, regardless of category or industry or anything else. So that's a huge thing. Of course, academia too. Academia is a place, you think about oracles back in Athens, Greece, even when democracy originally kind of started getting used at scale. And even then, oracles were essentially just the academic elite. They were scholars, right? And oracles were actually the means by which government was formed and government decisions were made. It was somewhat democratic, but at the end of the day, it was really centralized towards those who had the privilege of being educated and could read and write. And those are where decisions came from, right? And that's still oftentimes what happens, right? It's obviously we need expertise to a certain degree. If you have certain health and policies coming out, you don't want just everybody making those decisions. If you have certain policies coming out that impacts fishing or farming, you don't want non-experts who don't understand those fundamental categories making those decisions, right? Okay. However, there's a lot of things that impact everybody, that aren't necessarily specialized categories that you need to be an expert to understand, or that you need to be an expert to make decisions for, that impact you without your representation.
Hmm.
And that's a threat to democracy, right? Especially when the way that that influence is acquired is often through financial means. So it not only ends up not being a thing of expertise sometimes even, but it ends up being a thing of money and that
It does.
provides
Yeah.
power.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you think about like the ways that blockchain could democratize all of those important categories of our lives, healthcare, academia, and education overall, all the our employment and workplaces and our communities that we live in, you think of HOAs and buildings, and you think of like property managers and landlords, and you think of like how communities are run with city councils, and you start thinking about all these things, and obviously a lot of those things sound political, right? At the end of the day, they're political structures. But there's a lot of parts of our lives that have often you know sort of feigned democratic values.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
you ask most people if they're truly democratic, and of course a lot of people don't feel represented by those existing systems. And so blockchain and decentralization of those gives us an opportunity to improve all those things.
Right. And one thing about our financial system, it we talked about this before. The different financial systems, whether it's feudalism, mercantilism, capitalism, slavery, they all are born and they have a lifespan, and then they kind of fade away,
Mm-hmm.
and something else takes the place. Capitalism has spread throughout the world. It wasn't too long ago when Russia was a socialist country. 50 or 60 years ago, Russia fashioned itself as a socialist country, and China was communist, where everybody was going to be treated equally.
Mm-hmm.
Now those are probably two of the biggest capitalist countries on earth. So capitalism has sort of filtered throughout every country on earth, and there's a disparity. There's a glaring disparity in terms of where the wealth is concentrated. And it's kind of shocking in a way that certain people have so much wealth and then certain other people can't eat. And what we're saying is that there's probably not a sustainable way to run a society. And many societies in the past, they sort of reach that point, and then there's some sort of upheaval. Or
Yeah.
the bottom flips over and becomes the top, and then they start all over again. But I think decentralized finance and progressive decentralization. We're not saying that tomorrow we should have blockchain voting and Bitcoin should be the currency, but I think as we move forward, progressive decentralization has to be managed and legislated so that we can have a smooth transition. Because I think the system that we have now doesn't work great for everyone, and for some people it works really good, and for some people it works really bad.
Yeah.
And it's a term. It's a case of people wanting equity. And it's a case of having an equitable system or a more equitable system.
Yeah.
And here again, when these financial systems, when they go away, they don't go away overnight. They sort of phase into something else. And I
Right.
think that's what we see now is, capitalism is sort of phasing. Decentralized finance is kind of like on the scene, and it's here to stay.
Right.
Now, one of the problems, decentralized finance is in the early stages, sort of like our banking system was in the late 1800s and early 1900s, where every regional bank issued their own currency. So now, you know, anybody can, with a white paper and some programmers, can issue a digital currency. A
Right.
cryptocurrency can have their own cryptocurrency. But what happens is we're finding out now that a lot of this currency is really not such a good. It's not really a good currency. It's not a good exchange of value, because sometimes it has value and sometimes it has no value.
Right.
You know, Alex, you want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we've been faced with cryptocurrency recently. There have been so many, but just maybe hit on a few of them. I mean, it's just every morning get over my email. There's like another scam.
Yeah, I mean, in especially in a somewhat of a bear market where obviously prices across the board and have gone down. You've had liquidation. A lot of things that were designed sort of to like create money out of thin air in the crypto space when things were good, suddenly didn't work, right? And this created like a big issue. On top of that, you've had, we've talked about Luna on the show. We've talked about some of these examples where, you also had founders who were pulling from the cookie jar a bit and, just taking money from liquidity pools. And so at the end of the day, you've had a lot of serious issues that, in retrospect look bad. You look at Celsius right now, who's obviously bankrupt and insolvent. You've had a lot of these crypto like bank alternatives and things that end up insolvent. You've had entire hedge funds.
Coinbase insider trading. I mean,
right. Coinbase has had insider trading. You had Three Arrows Capital that was promising everything was fine, and then it wasn't. And I think even Celsius was saying like, oh, well, we're fine because even with prices going down, we have our loan business. Come to find out, a big part of their loan business had gone to Three Arrows Capital, and Three Arrows Capital had dunked most of their investment and all their eggs in one basket with Luna because money always go up. And so along this whole line of people just making tons of money, most of these founders totally, very wealthy now, but all their holders, not so much, right?
Yeah,
caught holding the bag.
That's
and
right.
so you've had this issue of poorly designed protocols on top of crypto that were sort of designed to just make money for the people who got in early or the people who made it. And
the technical name for that is a scam, right?
I mean, yeah, like some of them, sometimes they're Ponzi schemes, sometimes they're, they're called rug pulls when a founder just takes money out of the top and leaves. At the end of the day, they're all fraud. I mean, some of them were just poorly designed and unregulated. You look at something like Celsius. Celsius wasn't a fraud, but it wasn't. There were some bad decisions made in terms of like who they gave loans.
There was no regulation, is what there was.
Right.
I think that was a big problem.
And so they're all sort of different in their own way, but really alike in the way that like some critical regulation and critical oversight could have prevented all of them. Right. And so at the end of the day, crypto itself is not really the issue. The issue is that you have a bunch of people building things on top of it that don't have the proper regulation and oversight to make sure that people who use it are protected. And that's the whole point of regulatory bodies, right? Or they say it is. The whole point of these regulatory bodies is to protect the consumer or protect citizens from not having to read code themselves or having to know a lot about financial instruments to be able to like put the pieces together before they put money into something that, Mark Cuban is look at Voyager. Mark Cuban was on, TV saying like, this is, his basketball team's behind it. There's like, special codes as you sign up. He's saying it's not that there isn't any risk, but it's as close to no risk as you can get. And then here's Voyager, completely insolvent, right? Yeah. And now Mark Cuban and Voyager are getting sued. And so, at the end of the day, it's just careful. We still need some regulation and regulating bodies, even if what they look at or how they determine things is entirely different because it's new technology. You can't apply the same old finance rules to new technology. And I think we really dove into this on the last episode about what governance in DeFi looks like. It's going to look really different, and it should, but we still need it.
Yeah, we do. And I think what kind of sets DeFi apart from the system, the financial system we have now? It's a different way of thinking about money. The financial system we have now is based on making money all you can, keeping wages low, keeping prices high, concentrating the wealth, which is good for the guy at the top of the pyramid, but may not be good for society at large.
Right.
I mean, I was just, a gentleman, we had a conversation the other day. The gentleman said, well, if I had Elon Musk's money, I said, what would you do? He said, I'd buy up all the farmland in the country and I control the price of food. I said, do you think people would allow for that to happen? They said, well, he's probably got enough money to do it. But seeing that's just one of the things you run into.
Well, that's what Bill Gates and BlackRock are already doing that.
Yeah, they're already doing that. Yeah, yeah.
So
But I
you have to
don't
catch
think
up.
it's going to stop. It's going to stop, and I think that's one of the problems that you run into when you have a lack of regulation with either system.
Yeah.
Because decisions are made based on the creation of monetary value and not based on making society better.
Right. It's not the measurement necessarily.
It's not the measurement, yeah. And we have our set of problems here in the United States right now. Political, and politics follows economics. Mm-hmm. It always has and always will. And the reason I say that is because the money at the top, our legislation and our system is designed to benefit you. If you have a couple $1 billion, you're pretty much foolproof. The same rules that apply to everybody else don't apply to you.
Yep.
Because there's ways around it. And I think one of the problems with the financial system that we have now is that it has no long-term viability.
Right.
It may be good for 200 or 300 years, but I mean, say we go another 50 years and the wealth gets more concentrated. So now Bezos and Elon Musk and a couple other people own 90% of the wealth in the country.
Right.
And they say, well, you know what? We're just going to take it out. We're going to start a new country. We just bought a piece of an island off the coast of Africa, and we're going to start a new country. And we're taking all our money. I mean,
Right.
so I think, it's, that's kind of a weird situation, but I think you kind of create situations that are not going to be beneficial to the long-term, existence of a country or a society. And we kind of see decentralized finances maybe having a role to try to maybe reverse the flow of ownership of some of these things so that it's more equitable. And I think, nothing wrong with making money. I mean, you never get any argument out of either one of us as far as that goes. But I think you also have a obligation to help create a better society or a good society.
Right.
And I think when you just do it, for just the love of money, with no other criteria, then you can do a lot of things that probably aren't too good.
Right.
Equity, access, and ownership. Democracies, when you talk about democratizing, say, for instance, we talked about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which are organizations where everyone in the organization, like say if it was General Motors, people would have a vote on the direction of the company.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking about making electric cars. What does everybody think? And people would vote. Now, GM is kind of a big company, so maybe a smaller company might be more appropriate for an example. But everyone that works at the company has a stake in the company's survival. And they also have a stake in making decisions. Because if you ever worked, in most companies, they're not democratic. They're probably some of the most undemocratic
Right.
places on earth, because it's the chairman of the board and the owner and the the plant manager and whoever kind of says, "Hey, this is what we're doing.
Right.
If you don't like it, leave."
Yeah. You have an all hands meeting. They tell you what they decided. Half the
Yeah,
company's like, I didn't see that coming. It's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And then when things don't go right, um, they'll hire somebody for 200 or 300 grand, and they'll say, "Come and fix my
Yeah.
stamping my come and fix my stamping plant." And he'll go in the
Right.
plant, and he'll go and ask everybody, "How can I do this job better?" And the guy that's been
You
doing
pay
it
a
for 30 years will
consultant to
tell him,
come
yeah.
to avoid having democracy. You'll pay an
Yeah, so what they
intermediary.
do is they take all the ideas from everybody and they put them in a nice little binder. It says, "Here you go. That'll be 300 grand."
This is a summary.
And they
Yeah.
say, "What a great job." So if those people had input from the beginning, maybe you would never be in that position with having to do that, because when you own something, you feel differently about it. If you and I worked at a company, okay, we're gonna be fair, we're gonna be honest, we're gonna have integrity and all that. But if it's our company, then we might make some decisions that are a little different.
Right.
Because there's an old saying, you don't steal from yourself. You know, only a fool steals from himself, or something like that.
Right.
So, what are some other examples, Alex, of democratization, say, of society? Whether it be the workforce, the financial system, and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, one of the examples we talked about before comes down to uh, domain names in Web3. You have like ENS, for example, the Ethereum
Mhm.
name service,
Okay.
and it's a DAO. Everybody was airdropped even tokens for participating, and some people made a lot of money just by owning ENS names. But
Mhm.
you have governance proposals. People vote on those governance proposals. Um, those are implemented in code or however whatever is necessary.
Mhm.
And a lot of decisions are made that way. Every decision in terms of the funds of a DAO are done
Mhm.
through what are known as omnibus wallets, where you need
Okay.
multiple signatories, and those signatories are sort of determined also democratically.
Mhm.
Um, and so, you think about all the different utilities that we participate in to do normal things. You think about how we participate for food delivery in a it's always a company, and it's a barely profitable company. I mean, companies
Mhm.
like Grubhub and Uber Eats, um, and DoorDash is getting better. They're making better decisions to be profitable, but at the end of the day, most of these companies are barely profitable, if at all,
Mhm.
because the margins are so slim. And uh, so it doesn't really even work for anybody, but there's clearly a need.
Mhm.
And so you
Right.
imagine how you could decentralize that and democratize that between the actual delivery drivers. You could have a DAO that works on food delivery, and that's just an agreement over a smart contract between you buying food and somebody delivering the food, and maybe the restaurant as a participant as well.
Mhm.
And that's all you need, right? Is that agreement
Mhm.
of where some of the money goes. You have some funds that go to the restaurant, you have some funds that go to the delivery person, and that's it. And then you get your
Mhm.
food, and
Right. Right.
and until that delivery is finalized,
Mhm.
then the funds aren't distributed.
And the money would
And
change hands instantaneously.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
and of course there's complexities around how do you prove that food is and these are complexities we already have even with existing apps, right?
Mhm.
uh there's a lot of viral videos lately of like people lying about not getting their food, and then the driver going back and like confronting them and stuff like that. And you have things like that, but actually blockchain and the transparency of how you prove things
Mhm.
offers a more fair system there. You think about how these companies actually favor the consumer, right? Because they're the ones with money. They favor their story over the story of a driver.
Mhm.
There's drivers who have lost their jobs because the consumer wasn't happy.
Mhm.
Well, in that relationship, the only reason the consumer is favored is because the consumer has money and the company wants to make money.
Right. Right.
Um, the drivers are a dime a dozen, right? So imagine a world where the consumer and the driver are equals in that relationship, and the democratic system by which a dispute is handled is not, it doesn't favor one group more than the other. So there's, you think about all those relationships, all those little smart contracts you have throughout the day with others to accomplish the things you need to live. All of those things could be more democratized through decentralized technology.
So, I think as we move forward, with decentralized finance and decentralization, there'll be less need, for instance, in the finance arena, there'll be less need for a banker or a bank.
Right.
Blockchain, Bitcoin is used in a few countries now as the primary currency because the banking systems were so corrupt. I don't want to call any names, but the countries. The banking systems were so corrupt that people just started using, Bitcoin as a primary currency.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is 40% of the people in the world are unbanked. So you don't really need to have a bank account. All you need is a cell phone. And most people use Huawei cell phones because they're a lot cheaper and more reliable in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
Than Apple iPhones. They don't cost $1,000. In some certain countries they cost less than $100, and they do the same thing.
No.
With that being said, I think we're already seeing progressive decentralization. Maybe not so much here where we're at in the United States, but in many countries. I think it was Argentina who is fully on the blockchain now, and
El Salvador.
El Salvador, okay, El Salvador is like, accepts Bitcoin and various certain other cryptocurrencies for currency. For just like a dollar, like you would pay something for a dollar, you would pay something with Bitcoin. And I think what is it? Ethiopia has chosen Cardano as their cryptocurrency of choice. And I think in Nigeria, it's Bitcoin now that is responsible for quite a bit of trade and commerce. So I think we're seeing this sort of take place already. But I think what's important is that without proper governance, it's going to be a problem. Because that was one of the problems back in the late early 1900s when you had every bank, the Bank of Cincinnati had their currency, and then the Bank of Central Ohio had their currency, and you couldn't use the currency from Central Ohio or the Cincinnati Bank because it wasn't their currency.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because a lot of banks are moving to develop their own CBDCs. Central banking digital currencies. And so because there's also bad regulation that some people are putting forward because they feel threatened by the decentralization of currency. So you almost have this weird cycle restarting of they're like, well, we don't want the decentralized stuff as much, but every bank should have their own CBDC. And then you just have the monoliths competing against each other, and those cryptocurrencies will be allowed, right? And that presents an issue because one, it stifles innovation, right? Which is a constant struggle we have in capitalistic, late stage capitalism of it doesn't really push competition. It doesn't push innovation. It kind of pushes complacency across the board. And so you have a bunch of banks who just issue CBDCs and then they don't have to think about it again because all the other cryptocurrencies have been, officially dissolved or not dissolved. They've been officially sort of blacklisted from the existing the official economic system. And that doesn't kill the technology in this case. But it does present a problem. You look at a thing like Tornado Cash, for example, that was recently sanctioned. And now every address that has interacted with Tornado Cash is blacklisted and actually considered what do they?
Was that the currency from Iran?
No, Tornado Cash is a smart contract on Ethereum that essentially it can be used for laundering, right? So the idea is you sort of like leave an ETH, take an ETH, and so it is a smart contract. It's code, right? At the end of the day, it's not a company, it's code that, kind of mixes all, it's a mixer. It mixes all the ETH up, and then you get some ETH out of it. And
You can't trace it.
right. Yeah. It's
Sort of like buying and selling art. Sort of like the art
right.
business, high end art.
They've been able to trace sometimes, but the reality is you have so many people putting ETH in, it's hard to tell. So it's kind of hard to do. But they sanctioned it, the international something, and they sanctioned Tornado Cash. And now you have a bunch of people whose addresses are blacklisted, and maybe they weren't using it, for nefarious purposes. Maybe they just wanted privacy. The reality is that only a small percentage of it was directly linked to crime. So, let's say 20 or 30% of it wasn't nefarious or wasn't criminal, and you're sanctioning code that's still running because it's on the Ethereum blockchain. So it did $2 million yesterday. I don't know what, sanctioning doesn't do anything. All you're doing is potentially hurting safe addresses. And part of what the reaction, because it's still running, is you have a bunch of trolls who have started taking bits of ETH out of it and sending it to well-known addresses. And what they're proving with that, even though they're kind of screwing some people over, what they're proving is that, they're proving a point that it's not really effective in terms of what they did. Right. And now a bunch of people with legitimate addresses are now like associated Tornado Cash, not by their own doing, right? Which is kind of a bit of an issue. Yeah. So
now, any sort of regulation would have to be worldwide, I would think. What do you think?
Yeah, because
I mean, like the default currency of most of the world is the dollar,
right?
Even though China has their own currency, they still like to have a lot of dollars.
Yeah,
because that's why they keep us owing them money so they can have a lot of dollars.
When things are digital, it's really easy to swap currencies.
Right.
It's really easy to swap IP addresses and mask them and decide where you want your IP address to be. Like, these things are really simple to do. And so if the moment you don't have sort of you don't have some sort of global group, let's say the World Economic Forum, or, like the international banking, what's the BIS or whatever, the Bank of International settlements. Yeah. You need some sort of global consensus on what some of that base regulation looks like.
And a global clearinghouse could take the form of a smart contract.
Right.
So it wouldn't actually have to be people.
Right.
Okay. All right. Bitcoin seems to be the most stable of cryptocurrencies now. Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I don't know. It seems like if you had to pick one right now, that would be an international currency, would probably be Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm not what they call a maximalist. There's a lot of people who believe only in Bitcoin because of the risks that are involved. I mean, you look at the Ethereum merge is coming up September 15th or 16th.
Okay.
And the merge is going to switch from proof of work to proof of stake.
Proof of stake, okay.
The challenge there, of course, is that right now is based on who's staking, right? And so the issue right now is going to be centralization, because suddenly you're going to move, and the largest validators, Coinbase and other large players, are now going to have a lot of influence over the network. That could be an issue, right? If it's not decentralized. The Bitcoin's extremely decentralized. Ethereum has always been somewhat decentralized just by nature of its design, but when you move to proof of stake, one of the biggest challenges is getting it to a more decentralized point so that you have enough validators across the network then you don't have a centralization of power through staking the most.
So
So
proof of work would probably be a more desirable system, but it's too slow. It takes too much time, and it's too energy um, intensive. Would you agree?
yeah, so some of the complexity around proof of work is as a first layer, it's used for a lot of things it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bitcoin as a first layer should be proof of work because that's what makes it secure,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you have Bitcoin second layers, like for example, the El Salvador like Bitcoin city that they've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
The second layer is liquid, but the most common layer is called Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bitcoin Lightning Network is a second layer on Bitcoin that is extremely fast. Um, and it produces the kind of functionality and utility potentially that could do a lot of the things more quickly, right? So you could build DeFi, you could build NFTs, you could build all that stuff that Ethereum's done, but you could build that on the second layer, and it'll all be very fast and cheap.
Okay. Okay.
And it's standardized by a bottom proof of work layer that's designed well as a standardizing layer.
Okay. Okay. Now, so what's the next phase? Where's the next phase? Do you see regulation, the necessity for regulation as being sort of the next phase in the decentralized journey, the DeFi journey?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean they're all scrambling to get it. Luckily they're starting to think of cryptocurrencies as commodities.
Mm-hmm.
But then they're also trying to limit, like the FDIC is trying to limit um bank holdings of cryptocurrencies to like 1%. And if they go over that, then they lose their ability to offer
Right.
loans or like things like that, right? And so
Okay. Okay.
the FDA, yeah, that's not like official yet, but um there are, I think one of the issues is that there's a lack of consistency, right? There's not a cohesive message here. You have legislators who understand it differently and have different opinions. You have governments that are so split between agencies that understand different parts of the equation, and they haven't like put those parts together yet to figure out a cohesive strategy.
Mm-hmm.
um and the hope was that with Biden putting together like a special blockchain committee that you could start seeing some of that consistency, and we're just not there yet. We're not seeing it
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
You're not seeing, you're
Well, do you have?
seeing
You don't have a lot of. Do you have any coders on that committee, or is it the old? Is it the Wall Street guys?
right. No, you have a lot of traditional finance, right?
Okay.
um and a lot of them are catching up
Mm-hmm.
to crypto.
But that's
You
not
have,
what side their bread is buttered on, though. So why would they even have an interest in doing that?
they see a lot of traditional finance sees the benefit of the
Mm-hmm.
decentralized technologies for themselves.
And the inevitability of it.
Right. They know it's happening. They see
Yeah.
the value for themselves. They see the ability to settle things really quickly, to tokenize things that are
Mm-hmm.
complex, right? They see the necessity of it and they see the value of it. The problem is that if some of them that are more bad actors or more nefarious in terms of them wanting to maintain more control are going to push to only allow their own private blockchains to run, or be supported by the financial system. And that's where you'll see CBDCs start getting favored from regulatory standpoint versus the more decentralized options.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. Well, this is what's happening, folks. Decentralized finance is here to stay. Blockchain, Ethereum, coding. Um, this is where we're at. We've had one of the things about our system, our financial system, is you can't keep bailing everybody out all the time. I mean, there's probably going to be another need to bail somebody out. Whether I think we were kind of in the dumps anyway, and when the COVID hit, that sort of was an accelerant, to
Yeah.
sort of speed it up the process. But eventually, if there's a lack of revenue from taxes going to the government, and the government always has to spend money to help people, businesses mostly, but people sometimes too, then eventually you're going to run out of money,
Right.
or you're
Yeah.
going to devalue your currency. I mean, all it would take is for two or three countries to say, we no longer are holding dollars as our currency of choice.
Right. If the currency is inflationary,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter how many good things you do
Hmm.
when you print it off. The reality is you're essentially still stealing every one of those dollars from somebody in the future. And
Right.
so
Sure.
that
Yeah.
creates kind of a, it's a bit of a pickle there. Because we need to support those
Yeah. Yeah.
social programs. We need to support innovation. We need to support green, renewable energy. These are good things we need to support.
You don't need to give Boeing $100 billion and then to pay people and
Right.
keep people on the payroll.
Right.
Now they say, well, we don't have enough people.
Right.
Well, you had enough money to keep people on the payroll for 3 years. So what happened to it? You know, so that regulation cuts both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think DeFi needs to be regulated, and I think there needs to be some more regulation of the existing markets.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's probably not a popular viewpoint, but if you talk about long-term viability, you have to have a sustainable business, model that's going to be sustainable.
Boeing's such a great example because I think they're literally leaving. I'm in Chicago, and they're leaving Chicago, um, like Citadel, for tax reasons. I mean, at the end of the day, these companies that are ginormous are leaving. They will literally move their entire headquarters to save on taxes. I mean, that's a crazy thing when you
After they
think
got
about it. It's
bailed
like,
out by the taxes, after they
how
got
poorly designed are you as a
yeah,
company? And if you watch the Boeing documentary on Netflix, it goes much deeper than that in terms of the issues that they've had since they restructured a long time ago.
okay. So what do you think about Musk moving to Texas from California? What was that about?
I mean,
Was it just I'm going to take my ball and go home, or kind of thing?
yeah, I mean, first of all, he does a lot of things theatrically, right?
Hmm.
Um, First of all, I don't think he's like necessarily the most genius person on the planet, but going to Texas, of course, maybe allows him some more flexibility that he requires. It allows him some more of the leniency. There's definitely tax
Okay.
implications there, of course. Um, at the end of the day, of course, you also have maybe it is like sort of the space center of the country. So like
Okay.
maybe it's part marketing.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think it's probably a mixture of all those things, right? His theatrics to begin with, his love for attention, his love for the fact that we even on the show are going to talk about it, right? Like you have all of those reasons that he probably did that when he did.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All right.
probably
Well.
all the above.
Yeah. Well. You know, decentralized finance is here to stay. Capitalism is probably here to stay, although the form of capitalism is probably going to change. I think it'll be a little different with DeFi. We talk about progressive decentralization. So I think you will see capitalism in our financial system morph a little bit. And I think one of the challenges I think moving forward is going to be the education of people to what decentralized finance really is and what it really does and how it can be beneficial and help democratize the financial space.
Right.
And I think that's most people, whether they're on the right or the left, and you ask them and say, what's wrong? Well, the government's screwing us and I don't have enough money.
Right. Yeah.
This not a right or a left issue. It's the issue of the system that we live in.
Right.
And I think that's where the focus needs to be. And I think DeFi is really in a position to, help sort that out.
Yeah, how do we fix the problems we all agree on?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
do we also produce the best measurable outcomes outside of biases, right? Like outside of people's sides that they sort of fallen onto
Mhm.
how do we create a measurably better quality of life for the most people.
Right, right, and that's at the end of the day, that's what matters. Everybody
Right.
just wants to live and raise their family, or live their life in peace
Hmm.
and prosperity.
Right.
You know, but everybody can't be a billionaire, because if everybody was a billionaire, then it wouldn't be a
And you'd
billionaire.
have some other large
You'd have a
currency that
trillionaire, you
that
know.
some denomination that was much larger.
Right, right, right.
That'd
Okay.
be some serious inflation. Everybody was a billionaire.
Yeah, that would be. Well, look how many millionaires you have now, though. I mean, it's not. It
Right.
used to be a big deal at one time to be a millionaire, but that's not.
Right.
I mean, everybody knows 50 or 60 millionaires now. It's not that big of a deal anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, $1 million doesn't go as far as it used to, though. So I guess that's that's why. So. Okay. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. This is the DeFi Collective, and our email is show@thedeficollective.com. If there's subjects that you like to hear us discuss, please let us know. We typically cover subjects that we've had a request from somebody to cover. And there's been a lot of interest on decentralized finance and how it's integrating, with our present financial system, and how the effects that it's going to have on our democracy or our society. And hence, show@thedeficollective.com. Let us know what's on your mind, and we'll certainly talk about it. So, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time, but ours is up. Alex, you got anything to say in closing?
No, yeah, have a good week.
Have a good week. Make some money and save some money. Okay. Take care.